Welcome to the future of money. Come with us on this journey into the world of Bitcoin, blockchain and crypto projects. You're going to meet the trailblazers. These people have changed my life and they may very well do the same for you. Welcome back, hard forkers. We've got a very special show for you today. We're joined by Jordan from Waters Above Crypto. Welcome along, Jordan. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And a face familiar to many of you, does a lot of work in the background for the channel. Welcome back, Maggie. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So basically, I have been very fascinated coming across your site. Maggie put it on my radar, Jordan. The first thing I noticed was your very first video was all about the Wyckoff method, something that has popped up on numerous channels of late, but you've clearly been involved in utilizing that method for quite a while. So we're going to get into some charts very shortly. Maggie's got some very interesting things to discuss with you moving through the show also. But can we kick it off? Can you tell us a bit about why you use the Wyckoff method, a bit about you and your background?
Yeah. So, well, a quick intro, in all my previous jobs that I've had before I started these like business endeavors, I was typically in an educational or managerial role with a focus on training people in particular skill sets. So I have about a decade of experience helping people with learning new skills and creating businesses, and was really focused on that before I stepped into the entrepreneurial role. So in the last 4 years or so, I've been focused primarily on creating business and helping clients create and scale businesses. About 2 years ago, I created a couple of successful e-commerce businesses, and I was simultaneously learning about the Federal Reserve System and how fiat worked, and basically educating myself on fractional reserve banking and the threat that it has to preserving wealth for the long term. So that was kind of what piqued my interest about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. And then, I started teaching myself very early on about Wyckoff method. And Richard Wyckoff was an early 20th century stock market investor, passed away in 1930s, right before the Great Depression. And his work, which was called the Wyckoff method, is actually about a century old. So it's back tested, and it seemed like a really great place to start. If you're going to learn something, you might as well learn something that's been tried and true. So yeah, it was kind of a lucky thing because I stumbled upon it by accident, but I'm glad that I did because it was the basics and it's the fundamentals. And it's one of those things that once you skip over, you could get a lot of gaps in your progress, especially with TA being so complicated, technical analysis, excuse me. It's such a complicated thing. And especially if you're trying to learn how to trade, a lot of people lose a lot of money trading because they skip those very fundamental and basic strategies. And what was so nice about Wyckoff method is you could learn market structure and market cycles also. A lot of people, they have a kind of their biggest struggle is learning where they are in a chart. And that's what I love about Wyckoff method. It's kind of like the compass. So when you're lost, if you use Wyckoff, you could find where you're at. And that's a really helpful thing, especially with cryptocurrency being so volatile. And that's also why a lot of people lose quite a bit of money trading cryptocurrencies because they don't know where they are. They don't know what the next move is. And Wyckoff method could really actually pretty much be the only tool in your arsenal to help you out with that.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and looking at some charts because there's plenty of confused people at the moment. That's for sure. I'm one of them.
One of the things outside of Wyckoff method that's really helpful, that's been a big part of my work lately, has been kind of examining moon cycles. So not like really in depth and technical astrology at all. It's just very basic, applying the new and the full moon. So yeah, if you want to switch over the screen, I could actually give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on with that. All right, so you should be able to see what's going on here, correct?
Yep.
Great. So I have a moon cycles indicator that I use, and it's actually pretty basic. The way that it is set up by stock is a little bit weird because it has these colors inverted. But essentially what's going on here is you can see the white circles are the full moons and the darker circles are the new moons. And every time we get around a new moon, we have a bullish price structure. And every time we get around a full moon, we have a bearish price structure. So the long and short of it is around full moons, the prices are down or they correct into full moons and then they recover and move to the upside on new moons. And eclipses have played a massive role in this whole thing. And every time we get eclipses, especially back to back eclipses, it seems to be some sort of an energy reset in the market. And of course, the last two eclipses we had were right here a couple days before the huge market correction that we got in crypto. And then the next following new moon. So we had that lunar to solar eclipse within like a 15-day time frame. And lately we've seen, since that happened, it's been a completely opposite story of what we were used to seeing back in March and April when everyone was happy and everyone was making money. Now it's quite the opposite. A lot of people have lost a lot of money because they bought into the top. And that's how markets are designed. They're essentially designed to push you through the sentiment. And yeah, it's been an interesting form of analysis for people who, once you learn Wyckoff in a very quick way of showing you Wyckoff in the long term, I could just take all this off and I could put it in like a weekly chart. I'll reset this. What happens here is it's called a buying climax. It is when all the buying pressure has been exhausted and there's no more buying left. So what happens is you have a market correction. And what happens during this time is you try to create a support, but then you dump down to lower lows. And during this move right here, it's called the selling climax. So you have here, you've exhausted all the selling. There's no more selling going on, and there's only one more direction to go, which is up. And in this right here, it's called automatic reaction or automatic rally. And this is just how the market goes. Once it's been overly bullish, it becomes overly bearish, and then it has a reaction. And that reaction goes to the upside. It doesn't create new higher highs. And then you have a very big, scary moment, which is called a spring. And the spring in Wyckoff was back when the pandemic started. So it was this big V-shaped recovery. When this was falling to the downside, everyone was screaming, Bitcoin's going to zero. It's never going to do, like whatever. It was all nonsense. And what happened is we actually created a higher low compared to the selling climax and recovered fairly quickly. So this V-shaped recovery sort of thing is designed to reset the market energy, to kind of shake out bears, shake out bulls, and to get people to kind of FOMO or get scared out of the market at the same time. It's a really sophisticated tactic by Composite Man, and that's what Wyckoff focuses on. It focuses on the bigger players in the space, and it's called Comp Man or Composite Man. And Composite Man is the central banks and the Federal Reserve and all these big money players, people who have trillions of dollars. People who have $100 or $200 in Bitcoin do not move the market. And that's why, especially up here when we were forming this top structure, a lot of people were putting very speculative bets on these lower cap altcoins. And since then, the lower cap altcoins have all substantially drained away. And Bitcoin's had about a 50% correction. So not only is it the best performing asset of the decade, but it's also the least volatile out of all the cryptocurrencies. So in short, once you have your spring, then you start to see structure recover. Once you create new highs above the automatic rally, you start to head on to your next cycle. And what was kind of odd about this cycle is we just moved up. It just didn't stop moving up for so many consecutive weeks. And that's indicative of a problem. When there's only buying and there's no selling, that's time to expect a very big volatile market correction. So, for anyone who's been in my mastermind course, when I designed it back when Bitcoin was only about $10,000, I was telling everyone in that course to expect Bitcoin to move up to about 60 to 70,000 before we see a huge correction. So that was back when the price was around 11K. It moved up to 65 and then it pulled back. So it ended up being a pretty good call. And I was anticipating it to come a little bit later, about June, but it pretty much happened in the end of May. So it was an interesting time because the pullback was way more volatile than we expected. And then I started basically teaching all of the people in my community that this reminds me of the 2013 bull run. And that's where we can get into the conversation later about the Shemitah or the sabbatical year and market cycle corrections. So, or if you want to call it bear markets. And Bitcoin is seemingly bear market proof. It's never actually had a bear market. It's gone from 1 penny to 60,000 and it's still trading above the previous all-time high. So it's never entered a bear market. It's only been consecutively hitting new highs every 4 years. And in traditional stock tech, terminology, a bear market is a prolonged period of low prices that are breaking below lows. So until Bitcoin can break below $3,900, it is not in a bear market. It's just in a forever bull run.
But then, can I just ask a question, actually, Jordan? You know, when you talk about the spring in March 2020, we're not talking about the weather spring. We're talking about that spring part of the Wyckoff strategy. I mean, that was due to the COVID. I mean, that could not have been foretold. So how does that work, where there's this outside unknown that comes into play, and then you have this, what seems to be what you've just described to us a few moments ago, really about what's going on in the world? How to...
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So it's actually kind of easier to answer than you'd imagine, and it has to do with the number 222. So in numerology, or using angel numbers, the 222 is a very powerful number. And if you study the amount of time in between the basically the World Health Organization declaring the COVID-19 pandemic a pandemic, and if you go back 222 months before that, we had 9/11. Now, what's also really interesting is if you take the cryptocurrency crash of 2018, according to the dates that we get on Wikipedia, which was around this time frame, and you go back 222 months, you get the dot-com bubble crash. So everything is actually sort of more designed by this grand scheme, numerological plan. So basically today, using Wyckoff, we can zoom in to since the spring, right back here. This spring using Wyckoff is when essentially we call it blood in the streets. It's the scariest time to invest, but it's actually the smartest time to invest, because you're doing the opposite of what the average person is doing, which is selling. Instead of selling, you're buying. And that was during this period right here. And since the spring, then what you have is something called a test, where you go sideways, kind of boring, and you retest previous structure, which you can see if I leave my cursor right there, it's perfectly in line with the previous level before the crash. Then a jump above that is called SOS, or a sign of strength, because this is showing that there's strength in Bitcoin and there's strength in the chart in and of itself. Then we see that there's actually a new uptrend and break above the previous automatic rally, which was right here. Once Bitcoin broke above $13,800, you can see it just went ballistic to the upside. And this is something that if you were focusing on Wyckoff, you'd have been very, very quick to notice. And then, as I said earlier, we did have just a rampage to the upside with very few corrections. And the corrections that came were very short-lived, and the bulls stepped in and the prices continued onto higher highs until we got into this $60,000 range. Then you can see if I leave my cursor flat, we pretty much couldn't break through $60,000 concretely. And once you see multiple tests of a resistance without an ability to break up, that is typically when you expect a dump, or you expect a larger correction. Now, this larger correction that we got, what it would be called in Wyckoff is an LPS, or a last point of support, or a last point of supply. And that's what's interesting right now, is you can tell even yesterday or 2 days ago, when the Bitcoin price started to get below 30,000, you see how quickly it got bought back up. We're actually sitting at 32 right now. So every time it gets into this lower $30,000 level, you can see from back here, it's just too much buying activity. The whales that are controlling the price action have way too much liquidity set at these lower levels, and they don't want it to break. Now, that's not me saying it won't break, but that's just from a technical perspective, this is kind of what's expected. After you have a long, flat top, you need to have a long moment of what's called a reaccumulation. So in Wyckoff, it's very simple. You have an accumulation cycle, which was this. This was your accumulation cycle from December all the way up till right here in October of 2020. So again, from December 2018 to October 2020, anytime you bought Bitcoin there, you were in profit and you're in a great position. Then you have to have reaccumulation, and then finally you have a distribution. So it's an accumulation and distribution, sort of like a yin yang. But then those moments in between it, reaccumulation and redistribution, are like the dots within the yin yang symbol, the black and the white dot within the symbol. So what I believe we are in right now is what's called a reaccumulation phase. It's a second chance before the bull run ends. And I believe that based off of my looking back on historical data, Excuse me. And I don't want to talk too much about the Shemitah just yet, but going back in historical data, we've never seen a major market correction before a Shemitah starting. We've only saw one during a Shemitah or after, immediately after. Now that tells me the Shemitah starts in September and it ends next September. So this is the area of time to see an actual market crash for the stock market. And if the stock market crashes, then Bitcoin crashes. That's just the way it works. They're tethered to each other with the algorithms. So I'm suspecting that what we're at right now is just called an LPS in Wyckoff. Again, anyone who studies Wyckoff, you could go look at where that looks like. And then essentially, I'll be expecting a recovery for this market sometime in October. And then we should see new highs before November, meaning we should see $66,000 Bitcoin before November starts. Then we have an eclipse sometime in November, and we should start to see a blow off top into December around the new moon, because the last two bull runs ended on the new moon of December. It's happened both times in 2017 and in 2013.
Okay, that's quite precise information that you're giving there. Not financial advice, anybody, but
no, absolutely not financial advice, but it's just the cycle. And what's great about the cycle is you can study and see where things are. And I could just quickly show you back to the previous cycle around this time of year. You see that big red candle? Guess when that happened? It happened in July. Julys are always really bad for us, even during a bull run. Like if you zoom out right here and you look at from this September timeframe to where things were here, one of the biggest, scariest times was July, because we see this huge movement down into June and then an even deeper move into July. It's a scary thing to see. But then what happened? Moving into August, you get a nice recovery. So that's what's kind of in the cards, I believe, for the next month. Basically, we should see a slight recovery for cryptocurrency and the stock market into the month of August. And that's historically what always happens. So it's not my opinion. It's looking back at the charts and just seeing what has happened time and time again. What's beautiful about like looking at the S&P 500 chart, for instance, is it's over 100 years old. So you don't need to have opinions anymore. You could just go back and look at the data.
Absolutely.
And that's what technical analysis is. A lot of people, when they're getting into technical analysis, they're learning it from overly emotional content creators. And these people that have so much emotion, that's like the number one thing you want to avoid when you're learning analysis, when you're learning how to read the charts. You don't want to have any emotion at all. Why?
But do you think sorry to interrupt. Do you think it's also because people keep going into different time frames? Because the time frame that you've just presented there is quite a long time frame. So for a lot of people, they would already be looking at it from a 4-hour or 15-minute, and then that's when the emotions come into play. Would you say? Or
yeah, and that's what's also great about Wyckoff is I've shown people in my community and even in my course that you could do Wyckoff on a 4-hour chart. You could do it on a 1-hour chart. It works every time. Like this spring right here, you can zoom in on a 1-hour chart and you could find moments where we get that spring. It's pretty crazy how it works. And it's moreover, there's just patterns, and these patterns are quite predictable, believe it or not. The hardest part is when you start to apply those smaller time frames in your investment thesis, because investing has nothing to do with the 4-hour chart. Investing should be a 4-year minimum endeavor. If you're just trying to get in this market and throw some money in it and expect to become a millionaire in a week, like that's what people have been fooled into. It doesn't work that way. And it's kind of interesting too. Some of the richest and most successful investors are typically year by year outperformed, but overall their track record sits them at a higher position because of their patience and because of their ability to inject liquidity as frequently as possible over the longest amount of time. So what I'm trying to say there is perhaps Cathie Wood has outperformed Warren Buffett every single year for the past decade, but Warren Buffett has been in this game for a long enough time where he just prevails based off of his time in the game. And it's kind of like an interesting thing how so many newer investors want to just jump in and outperform everything, but they don't look at it from a long-term perspective. So me sharing the weekly chart on Bitcoin is actually not even that big of a deal because it's still sort of a short time frame in a decade that's been around for, or sorry, in an asset that's been around for over a decade.
Okay, so patience is the key also if you're going to get into trading, or well, you have to differentiate between you're investing or trading. Trading is more of a speculating, almost gambling, because people's emotions get the better of them, whereas investing is somebody who has the patience and doesn't, look at the charts, for example, on a daily basis. They're focused on that long term. They're going to get in, at this stage, and then they're potentially going to get out 5 years later. They're not desperate for the money. So you were going to talk about some other cryptocurrencies. I think XRP was the next one you were going to talk about.
Sure, yeah, I could quickly go over XRP and then
sorry, Sean, I've just taken over your section.
No, that's fine, Maggie. We knew you'd be a star. I've been grooming you to replace me for years.
That's not going to happen. I like to hide in the background, Jordan.
I feel you. So yeah, we could quickly touch on XRP and then Theta and maybe a couple others if that I'll just do a quick breeze by because I do want to just preface by saying that like Bitcoin is what moves the market. Like it's the main energy behind this whole sector's price action. So the focus on the charts is always in Bitcoin. Like XRP is nominal in the bigger picture. Ethereum is nominal in the bigger picture. They're afterthoughts, and anyone who wants to argue that typically is delusional because they're not able to see that if you look at the market cap of Bitcoin, you could quickly get answers. And if you were to take 15 charts and pull them all up at the same time, when Bitcoin has a big correction, they all have a big correction. But when some random altcoin has a correction, Bitcoin won't move. So it's kind of interesting. I always tell people like Bitcoin's like it's like the Ark, and it has two of each coin on its boat, and whatever it wants to do is what it will make everything else do. Yep. But at the end of the day, it's preventing you from experiencing the flood. And what's the flood? It's like our traditional economic system. So in short, one of the things that's really interesting about XRP is this bull run that we had in 2018 and how it's become sort of like the rock star bull run to give a lot of speculation to very high prices on the XRP chart. And it's been, I don't necessarily want to use the terminology like claim to fame, but XRP is something I go over in almost every single video I make. And we've been calling some really interesting things on XRP. For instance, the first break of $1. I made a video back in March discussing how XRP will break $1 in the month of April, and it did, and it went as high as almost $2. And that was really nice to see because I was also telling people simultaneously to not expect a new all-time high in XRP until the end of this year. So even though I was saying that it'll break $1, I was also pretty adamant about it not going past this previous high. And it's been an interesting ride for XRP because it's one of the most suppressed assets. Even I will say that. And I'm a heavy XRP holder, by the way. So even though it's lagging asset out of a lot of other cryptos, it's been sort of one of those indicator type cryptos for me. So while a lot of Bitcoin channels will typically only touch on Ethereum, I actually purposefully go out of my way to almost never talk about Ethereum, and I go to XRP. And it's been sort of one of those things for me. It's not because I'm like a XRP army member or anything. I really could care less about any of that stuff. It's just because I've always been really curious as to seeing what Ripple and XRP, the token, what its role will be in the future. And I have a pretty good idea of what that role would be. And if anyone watching this is, a fan of XRP, they're probably able to fill in the the blank with what I'm thinking there. But yeah, XRP is an
Can you help fill in the blank?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, XRP is an interesting one because it seems to be tied to the retail banks. And a lot of people have this opinion that it'll be tied to like the central banks. And although I do see some of the reasoning behind that, I'm not necessarily convinced. And I think that's where a lot of these XRP channels fall off the rails because they put too much faith in the stuff that we can see and the stuff that we operate on a daily basis. And they like to believe that we would have a chance to be part of that. And that's where I disagree. So whatever's going to be taking over the movement of liquidity at the largest scale, at the central banking level, I do not believe it will be a retail cryptocurrency that we talk about today in this conversation. I believe it will be a government issued fiat like stable coin that'll be infinitely minted, and it'll be controlled by the World Economic Forum or the IMF, or the IMF or the Federal Reserve is what will be controlling it, in my opinion. And
I think you're right. I agree with you on that. And I tell you why, because Augustin Karsten, who's in charge of the Bank of International Settlements, he is adamant that they're going to bring out a central bank digital currency. And it definitely is something that the central bankers want to control. And unless they take over XRP Ripple completely, so Brad and his gang are not involved anymore, and it's owned by the central bank, they're not. I agree with you. They're not going to use XRP as the main solution.
Or they're going to shut them down with the case that they're currently in with the SEC.
You think? I don't know. I think it might still be used within the system, but it's not going to take over the central banking digital currency system.
Well, one of the interesting things about this SEC conversation, and again, like Maggie, I do believe you mentioned being in my course, and I actually have a live video from that course when XRP was 18 cents, and I was just like screaming, buy this thing, because you're never going to see this ever again. And that was probably one of my greatest calls ever, because buying XRP at 18 cents, I have all the orders saved, screen caps. I was buying XRP at 17 cents. It was crazy. It was a really amazing time, in my opinion, because it was a setup. It was a setup to have retail sell their bags, and we did the opposite. And these gains are pretty massive.
Yeah.
I mean, 700% in the course of just a couple months is pretty insane, especially for a suppressed crypto as XRP is. So the reason I mentioned the SEC case, though, and one of the things that I tell everyone who believes that XRP will be this like one world currency nonsense is because if the SEC thing was true, and you look into Ripple's clientele, like who their customer base is, allegedly, it's like 90% everywhere outside of the United States of America. So why would the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is a United States government body, why would 5% of their customers' government affect the price so substantially? So there's something bigger going on here, and I don't buy it. I just don't buy it that the SEC case is even a real thing. It's just another piece of theater. It's another piece of political theater to manipulate the reason for where they're sending the prices of this coin. And, I do still see a bright future for XRP regardless, because if Bitcoin does well, XRP will do well. And that's always been my stance. That's why when I saw XRP at 18 cents, I was just imagining what it would be like to see Bitcoin at 60,000 and where XRP would be because of that. And that worked out really well. So this, by the way, was during the SEC case. So why did the price go from 18 cents for the United States of America Securities and Exchange Commission jumping into the picture? But then it still went up.
Jordan,
still
I
goes
simply
up
can't answer that. That confused the hell out of me when I saw
Jordan, can you zoom out for a moment? Because I'm seeing a pattern here. Completely zoom out, like for a couple of years. Yeah. Okay, that looks like a massive Bart Simpson kind of effect going on there. It looks like we're about to drop. Look at the shape of, if you're just looking at patterns, it has these peaks in 2014, 2015. Then it goes flatlined, it's dead, and then suddenly it gets life again. But then look at this pattern from 2018 to 2021. It's not quite about sort of Simpson sort of head, but it looks like it to me. So therefore, if you can see, I'm just trying to look at 3 cents. You see where the green candle in 2017, yeah. Is it 3 cents? Yeah. Shouldn't it be coming down to there at some point? But we can't tell when, because we don't have a crystal ball.
So in my opinion, the way this was all like behind the scenes. This had nothing, like there was no retail going on back here. Very few people.
Just me. I held it right through 216 and 217 and sold it before that. That's why I've never bought it again. I'm still filthy about it.
Still a little salty about that one.
Very salty. Yeah.
Yeah. So Maggie, the one thing that's really helpful in moments like this and for questions like this is this indicator called the VPVR, the volume profile tool. So you could only get it if you're on Pro Trading View, but it's actually quite helpful. And where this shows you this 19 cent level is where the most trading is happening for XRP. So if we were to be closing like a monthly candle below this VPVR, this would be the next target, the spring, back at 11 cents. And then if we close another macro candle below that level, then yes, we could talk about a possible Bart Simpson in the works, because there's no trading range between this level and that level. But
I see.
I wouldn't personally entertain that. And I've never looked at that in my own analysis, because the way that I see this going is, again, classic Wyckoff. So what you have right here, your buying climax, then you have your selling climax, automatic rally, spring right here with a really damaging downtrend. Like this must have been the worst time to hold XRP, all the way from around September 2018 to this crash, because that's a lot of uncertainty in the downtrend and almost no bullishness whatsoever. But anyways, that's just a side note. What's going on here is retests of this VPVR with a strong supported bounce like you've got. That's a sign that, I don't ever see this going below 30 cents ever again. I think that was the last chance to buy XRP in the 25 cent range.
Okay, very interesting. All right, well, look, gosh, we've only done 2 coins at this stage, but I've got so many more questions that I want to ask you. So we're going to stop with the charts for the moment. If we've got time, we'll try and come back to them. But the really interesting thing that I'd love you to talk about today, it's a kind of an esoteric tool that you use as part of your trading strategy, and it's called Gematria or Gematria. Could you kind of, in a nutshell, explain to the viewers what Gematria is and how you use it as part of your trading?
Yeah, absolutely. So Gematria is essentially the numerical value of a word. So each letter in the alphabet gets assigned a number, and those numbers add up to give you the numerical value of that particular word. And I'm not sure if my screen's still sharing, but I could just explain to you the ciphers and the ones that I like to use. And essentially you have the English ordinal cipher, which is A is 1, B is 2, Z is, the last 26. And then after that, you have full reduction, which is basically taking you through 1 through 9. So 1 is A, B is 2, all the way up to I is 9. And then it restarts because it gets reduced using the rules of numerology. And then reverse is the same idea, except you have A is the 26th value and, Z is the first value. And reverse full reduction works just like full reduction, just with the reverse alphabet. Then finally, you have the Chaldean cipher, which doesn't include the number 9. And it does have a very interesting role into all of this. A lot of people have come out and, they've kind of proclaimed that this Chaldean cipher is the most pure cipher. I'm not going to debate that. It's been something where every single decoder that I talk to who's doing this as their life's work, people who do this as a profession, most of them that utilize Gematria, they consider the Chaldean cipher to be the most important. So I include the Chaldean cipher as part of that because of the, because everyone who I trust in this is quite adamant about that cipher, and it works pretty nicely. So yeah, in a nutshell, you have these 4 base ciphers. If you go to this website called gematrinator.com, and then you could add in other ciphers if you like. You could access the Chaldean cipher by going to other and just clicking on the Chaldean. And that's what I like to work with. I actually just like to work with these 5. And for now, that's been very helpful in my work in determining price action and certain cryptos that I'm going to be heavily invested in more than others because of matches that I see when I'm doing my decodes.
Okay, great. So with that, a lot of people think gematria it revolves around the Jewish calculation of numbers. They a lot of people refer to that if they have heard about gematria, and it's quite pertinent this year because you mentioned something a bit earlier about the Shemitah, and this being the Shemitah year. Could you kind of explain your thoughts and thesis on why it's going to be a very important year, and the Shemitah relates to a Jewish, I wouldn't say it's a celebration, but it happens every year. I'm not even going to try and explain. I'm going to hand it over to you, Jordan.
Yeah, of course.
Explain, please.
So just to kind of recap on the beginning of what you were mentioning, gematria is Hebrew numerology. So it's a form of numerology that's created it's throughout the Kabbalah, the Talmud, and etc. So gematria actually is geometry. It's geometry. So that's its origins in the Hebrew teachings. And essentially everything in this physical realm comes back to mathematics for explanations or deeper meanings behind the origins of matter itself. So that's a very deep and conceptual concept, but essentially everything in this world comes back to mathematics. So by utilizing gematria in Hebrew teaching, it's to get the numerical value behind our universe and understanding all of the aspects of our universe. So in regards to the Shemitah, Shemitah means release in Hebrew. And it's essentially every 7 years, they have a sabbatical year. That's what it's called, a Sabbath year. And every 7 years, we actually also have financial turmoil. And it always happens during these Shemitah years. So there's actually an agricultural purpose behind why the people who practice Jewish faith practice the Shemitah. It has agricultural ties. But again, think about prices of stocks as part of a natural cycle. You have growth and then you have the winter time. And then you have growth and then you have the winter time. It's a cycle, it's repetitive. But overall, everything fractals and everything continues throughout time. And that's what's really interesting about when you look at the S&P 500 chart, for instance. Although it does have massive market corrections every 7 years, it just keeps hitting new highs every 12 years or so. And what that's telling us is that's because of the fiat money system. Ever since the fiat system was created, it's essentially it would be a mistake to not invest those fiat dollars into a market that is ever growing, regardless of the time of the crashes or not. And quick examples of what's going on here. So the upcoming Shemitah will be starting on Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. Rosh Hashanah will be the transition time between September 6th through September 8th. So this is very soon. People need to wake up to this because this is very soon. And the Shemitah will go on from this Rosh Hashanah all the way to the next one, which is September of 2022. And a big reason, again, coming back to numerology or coming back to utilizing the numbers, the Hebrew year of this Shemitah will be 5782. So the Jewish faith is saying that this is their year, the 5782nd, as opposed to the rest of the world. We use the Gregorian system, and the Gregorian calendar puts us on the 2022. So it's just really interesting that when you add up these numbers, 5782, you come back to the 22, and we're going to be moving into the 22nd year of the 21st century. So we're going to be moving into the 22 year when the Hebrew year numerologically adds up to 22, and it is a Shemitah. And for anyone who practices numerology, the 22 is actually the master destroyer number. So it's tied to destruction. And that's kind of why I've been taking this a lot more seriously. Some of the previous examples of how the Shemitah has affected the markets, you could go back 7 years ago in the 2015 market correction in the Asian markets. So the Chinese stock market had a huge correction. Of course, the Chinese economy is very powerful, logistically especially, so it created a ripple effect and it damaged a lot of the Asian markets as a whole. Then you have 7 years before that, you have the 2008 housing crisis that happened during a Shemitah. Then you have, and also there was a huge issue with just liquidity as a whole. And then 7 years before that, we have the dot-com bubble crash, and then we have 9/11. Then 7 years before that, and you could just basically see 1993, 1986, and you keep going. And every single time we had a correction that was substantial. And some of our most iconic financial changes in the world happened during Shemitah years. One other quick note, or two things that might be really important for everyone. If anyone's aware of Bretton Woods, so Bretton Woods Conference was in 1944 during the month of July, and tomorrow will actually be the 77th anniversary of Bretton Woods. And if you study the numbers inside of Bretton Woods, you'll see it was 1944, where 44 countries showed up. So the 77 number is obviously quite important because, like I just told you, the sevens in Shemitah. So what that is 11 Shemitahs. It gives you the time frame for that. And then the last thing I was going to mention is next month on August 15th, it will be the 50th anniversary of President Nixon taking the dollar off the gold standard and creating the petrodollar, which had actually canceled out Bretton Woods. So Bretton Woods conference and all those changes with creating the World Bank and the World Bank and some of those changes financially as a whole to structure the inflation problems we were having from war, that actually all came to a close because of that change that President Nixon made of removing us off the gold standard. And then this is going to be the 50th year. So you have to remember with Shemitahs, you have 7 cycles of 7. So 7 cycles of 7 gives you 49. And then on the 50th year, you have Jubilee. This is really important that people learn about these numbers because remember what I just said about Bretton Woods. It's the 77th anniversary of Bretton Woods this month, starting tomorrow from the last day of the conference. And the next month will be the 50th anniversary, which was the 7/7, the 7 cycles of 7 Shemitahs. And that's happening the next following month in September. This is like a crazy time for numbers.
Jordan, on the 9th, because that's the 9th of August, right? That day that you're talking about, Nixon.
It's the 15th of August.
Is it the 15th? Okay, I thought it was the 9th of August because I've got a note here. Nixon took America off the gold standard August the 9th, 1971. But that happens to be the 220th day of the year. If you can check that for me and correct me.
Yeah, so the Nixon shock. The Nixon shock in my research is on the 15th of August. I might be wrong. We could just quickly look at it though. Like I mean, it should be here on a quick Wikipedia search.
Okay.
It's really interesting that this event is correlated to this Bretton Woods thing. And then on top of that, we have the Shemitah following the next month. It's like 1 month after the next, we're getting these really important dates showing up. So it says right here, decided to break up the Bretton Woods by announcing following actions on August 15th. So this was actually the time frame. It was between August 13th throughout the 15th when they made the 2 big decisions. So yeah, pretty much that's that time frame. Very few people are aware of that this happened.
Right.
So it's just so interesting how these huge economic things can occur, like the Shemitah creating all of, well, I always like to say the Shemitah creates the crash because that's my outlook, that's my perspective. But of course, other people would say, well, that's speculation, you know, you're just saying that because you're biased towards, but no, it's kind of inevitable at this time. Whenever you're studying these number sequences and kind of like how I brought up with the 222, not sure about like every single connection with that, but the 222 is a very strong number as well.
Okay, so this cause and effect thing that you're talking about, because I don't quite get, is the energy in the numbers and the people that follow this, and I'm talking about when I say the people, the societies, because sometimes in your videos you talk about the Jesuit society or this society or that society, and
yeah, I just call it the brotherhood.
Right. Okay. And this has been passed down through, hundreds of years, etc. But is the messaging coming through the numbers because that's what the society's seeing, or is there a message that is there an event that they know is going to happen because they're orchestrating it, and then they communicate it through the numbers that are important and pertinent to them? Because if you look at that Wikipedia page that you just showed us a moment ago, I mean, I was picking out different numbers there, like there was 33 points, something about the stock market, or some, you'll have to go back to it, but I saw 33 points because I know 33 is very important. Oh, what's that? 8th of the 15th. No, put the 9th. The 9th September. So
yeah,
that
this would be 1 month after that change on the start of the Rosh Hashanah. You will get the 33. It's just kind of a, playing with the numbers and showing how this is their number, the 33. When you're talking about the brotherhood, like that's one of their crucial numbers. So your question is kind of, entertaining this idea of, are they actually changing and making these things happen, or is there some divine, is this mistake that it happens?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah, it seems to be very deliberate when these things happen. And what I'm trying to understand, is it the numbers that are driving it, or they have an agenda and then the numbers fall into place? I don't quite know. See, that part is a little bit hazy and not very clear.
Yeah, for sure. So I could do my best to clear it up. So again, if you walk around in New York, Times Square, and you ask 100 people, do you know what gematria is? I bet you 99% of them will say, what are you talking about? So the same thing goes that if you ask people, do you know what a 33rd degree Freemason is? Or do you know what the Scottish Rite is? Or do you know what the Rosicrucians are? Or do you know who the Society of Jesus is? Do you know that our current Pope is a Jesuit? Like, if you ask them any of this information, they wouldn't be able to answer. But if you ask them, what their favorite Justin Bieber song is, they'd be able to tell you 10 of them. So the average person is just so, removed from this information that's why it's almost confusing as to, like, are the people who are controlling our universe actually controlling our universe, or are they just following some, pattern that is within them energetically, and it's coming from some higher place? And I get asked this question quite a bit, especially in regards to gematria, because it's such an esoteric and, it's actually quite hard to find solid information about gematria. Now, I'll share my basic opinion on this. Once you study the way that the order works, the way that Freemasonry, especially the way that it works from a mathematical perspective, and once you start to study the actual geometry of the Masonic Lodge and why they have their entrance door facing a certain, direction, and why they have a checkerboard floor with a certain amount of squares on it, and why they have Yakin and Boaz, the two towers, this is all done very intentionally. Even the Freemasons, they wear a apron, and that apron has a lot of symbology on it, but that apron goes back to the ancient Egyptian civilization. So people think that these guys in Egypt were all wearing like skirts, like this kind of wrap around them, but they were actually naked. They were naked and they were wearing aprons. And that apron has to come back to the mathematically, it would be called a trapezoid, I believe. And that comes back to the Yahweh. So there's so much to talk about with this. I would have to break down so much with slides and actually show you in a presentation. But my point being here is that all the way back from the Sumerian and the ancient Egyptian times, everything that we do in regards to zodiac, or, the constellations, or all mathematics in and of itself, this all is coded. So I believe that the elites, the people who are controlling this, they're just using the foundation to manipulate everything, because the way that the Freemasons at the highest level live their whole reality structure is under this belief that goes back to the Garden of Eden story in Genesis. They actually believe, and they write this in their text, they write this in their doctrine, that God did not want man to have knowledge. And that's where you get the story of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. So by eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge, which allegedly Eve did, and allegedly Eve shared that fruit with Adam, and then ever since then, humanity just went to shit. That's kind of the story we're given. But in actuality, what's going on here is that they, as the Freemasons, are looking at it that God wanted us to live in ignorance in the garden. He didn't want us to know as he knows. Therefore, he was the gatekeeper of knowledge. He was the gatekeeper of wisdom. So Satan, or Lucifer, who was masked as the serpent, tempted Eve to bite from the fruit from the tree of knowledge, so that she was now enlightened. She was illumined. And that's where you get the Illuminati from. This is where it's all coming back to. It's coming back to light. So this is a really fascinating idea, and we could talk about it forever, pretty much. I know I can, but the point being here is that with this knowledge is where you get geometry, which is where you get all mathematics, where you get pi, where you get Fibonacci, where you get all of these incredible numbers. Now, if you were the most wise person, wouldn't you want to create a community or a society of people equally as wise as you? It would just be a basic accident, I suppose, of just living in a world with humanity. Humans are very social creatures. So the fact that we have these what are called secret societies, and they're only made up of certain individuals who are of a certain bloodline, this is no different than the way the monarchy works, or the way that, kings and queens select the prince to marry their daughters. It's a structure that's also within the Hebrew religion, in the Orthodoxy. So selecting who you want to be in your circle, this is called playing God. So when you create events, or when you manipulate someone else's reality to fit your perspective and your theories, that's called playing God. So essentially what's going on at the highest levels is these Jesuits, Society of Jesus, whatever you call them, the Vatican, these people that are at the top are playing God. And that's why they hide behind God, so that the average person would never know what they're doing. That's why we have the Pope hiding behind being a Pope. But in actuality, if you go study the Jesuits, they call themselves the God's soldiers. They call themselves the warriors and protectors of God. Now that's kind of interesting, because in the 10 Commandments, it says that thou shalt not kill. So what is your what is your agenda? It sounds like you have a bit of an agenda up your sleeve. When you go and backtrack all the highest level leaders, you start getting to these high level, quote unquote, religious positions. And that's why, especially if you look into the prime ministers and all of the presidents that the US has had, and all of these leaders, they're all professing that they're Catholic or Christian, or, they're all saying that they're Christian. And I think it's really interesting when you study all of the stories, all the backstories, and then you also see that they are a practicing Freemason. How could you call yourself Christian when at the highest levels of Freemasonry, they follow Lucifer, and they say this in their doctrine? So it's extremely convoluted. And I believe that it's all a cover up to keep people thinking that this stuff is just accident. And there's some amazing decoders out there that are finding dates of certain events, of certain things that have happened, even in our really recent history, which shows you this numerological connection to other dates. And that's where it's like a really interesting rabbit hole.
Oh, well, I just came across Marty Leeds 33, funnily enough. That's his number after his name. And he's quite interesting, because he really explains it very well. I don't know if you've heard of him. But just going back to that point about, because everything that you talk about very much lends itself to Western society. But how does Asia play its part in this? Does it have societies as well? Because everything seems to be talking about Western and Christian societies, or European related stuff. So
oh, such a good question. I've never been asked that before. So one of the things that's amazing is if you look up the amount of Jesuit schools, higher education schools in China, blow your mind. It would blow your mind. So if you look into the 13 royal bloodlines, you have the Li family. So the Li family goes back to basically all these rulers, and I'm almost certain that it would go back to the bloodline of Genghis Khan. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in regards to the Jesuit order in China and how they've wrapped their tentacles around the education system in China. And we're always thinking in this part of the world that people in China go to school for long amounts of hours. They're very dedicated to scholastic, to study. And it's quite important to them, allegedly, on a societal position. Like they have reported suicides because of not doing well in school. Like that's a really interesting polarization between kids here in the States, where you could be failing a class, but because of like No Child Left Behind, you still pass. Everyone in the States is a winner. Even if you come in last place, they still have a trophy for you. So I think that's interesting.
Sorry, I was just joking. British humor.
Yeah. So to talk a little bit more about the Asian societies as a whole, I mean, it's pretty obvious here that if you look at how America has been, people say that America has yet to be sacrificed because we have this like perfect reality, yada, yada, yada. But I believe post 1970s was the first like a soft launch of a sacrifice of America. And what that was the removal of business and industry from this country. Essentially, you gave it all up to China, and China became a logistical powerhouse. And now they're pretty much the creator of all the toys and gadgets and technology that we're using now in this technocratic new world order, if you want to call it that. And I don't use that word like conspiratorially or with any negative, connotation, because at the end of the day, we're all connected right now because of this technology. But also there's some pretty dark, draconian functions to the utility of this technology in the future. And that's China's role. So what's going on is China's playing their role, we're playing our role, everyone's just playing their role in this big picture thing, and that's called globalism. So there's a global effort here since the creation of the United Nations, World Economic Forum, all these United Nations, even UNESCO, these things that seemingly are like great and like awesome, but at the end of the day, you're just controlling land, you're collecting taxes for it, and you're playing God. Because if there was a God, do you want him to have national parks where you need to pay $30 to look at the land? I mean, it's a little bit insincere. So I think that if it's tied to these basic principles of borders or, passports, or just look at all the control that's been implemented since just COVID, but also think about 9/11. And China is deeply embedded into all of that from the technological perspective. From the education perspective. And another interesting thing too is India. I've been studying this a lot too, because if you look at the CERN, so CERN that's over there in Switzerland, the entrance or the opening to the CERN, it's not easy to explain because there's an underground aspect to it that's massive. So I'm talking about the above ground version, of course. And if you just type in CERN and you look at the, above ground entrance, you'll be seeing a dancing Shiva statue. So I think that's really fascinating because Shiva's, the destroyer and the recreator of the physical realm, if you want to put it that way. And so what does Shiva have anything to do with the Large Particle Hadron Collider? Like, where do those two things come into sensibility? They don't. But if you study Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, you start to get some answers. You start to see like the more esoteric side to it all. So if you start to dive down the rabbit hole of like Vedic astrology or just the deities, and of course with India it's quite difficult because they have hundreds of deities, thousands probably. But if you just focus and catch up on the top 10, it'll be pretty amazing stuff. That's actually the core of my work, is focused on the Greek and Roman mythologies.
Wow, fascinating. I mean, we could go on for hours here, but I think we're kind of running out of time. And
yeah, I was just wondering if we could. I mean, for most of my audience, this will be the first time they're really coming across gematria. So I'm just really interested to sort of summarize how you're sort of looking at the short term here being the next month, but longer next year, and applying what you're talking about here to what's happening in crypto for us. If we can just put a little circle back on that a wee bit.
Yeah, of course. So one great example would be for XRP and how I utilize Gematria to determine this breakout date into April. And I'll just show you that real quick. One of the things that I do is I'll pull up my Gematria calculator, which is at gematrinator.com. Then I will pull up a moon cycles chart. It could be found at calendar-12.com. And then I will also pull up a week numbers chart. So to figure out what week we are in at the time. And these three things have been monumental in me being able to quickly decode and figure out what's going on. So anyways, the long and short of it is in the weeks of the 14th week and the 15th week of the year. So remember 14 and 15, we have April 12th through April 25th, but we also have a key, sorry, excuse me, I meant to say April 5th through April 18th, and April 5th is an important date. And I do sometimes I'll add up dates where I take the number of the month, like 4 plus 5. So you have April plus the 5th day in April plus 20 plus 21. That's one way that I like to add up dates. And that's just to give you a little bit of information on some other things that you could use to decode to figure out what's going on. But if I type in 4/5/2021, we could see the dates. Let me see, this is getting kind of in the way. With the date 4/5/2021, we come to the 14, but then remember that was the start of the 14th week of the year. So we're seeing confluence now, right? So let's go ahead and type in XRP and we get the 14 in Gematria. Not only that, but we lead into the 15 in Chaldean, and that 15 number, again, being in the Chaldean cipher, the most pure cipher, it's important for XRP. So we have this 15, and in the 15th week of the year, we're spanning through all the way up to April 18th. And what do you know? When does our breakout happen? It's happening. This big green candle right here was in the week of April 5th. So not only did we break out to new highs, but we traded into that 15th week of the year, hit new high of the year. So right now, the current all-time high in the yearly for XRP happened on the 15th week. And this is one of the simple ways of utilizing Gematria to be able to figure out some of the numbers. So if you also look at the resistance level, the hardest area for us to break, if I just leave my cursor right there, we're looking at $1.50. So it's the 15th week high. We couldn't break the $1.50 level concretely with a monthly close. So it's telling us our resistance level. It's telling us the breakout date. It's telling us the date of the breakout and when the high would be. This is a pretty fantastic way of utilizing the code. Another example could be for theta, just really quickly. I haven't looked at this in a while, so bear with me if I kind of go a little slower here, but I do have a good example where you type in theta. And theta I'm really fascinated with because it comes back to the same ciphers as Venus. And Venus is actually the god of, well, Lucifer is the goddess Venus. It's something that's kind of overlooked. But anyways, that's just a side note. With theta, you're coming to that 81. And if you go to the beginning of the year, let me move that real quick. If I go to the first day of the year and I go over to 81 days, you can see that right here, we're hitting our all-time high on the 81st day of the year. And a lot of this trading range that we're getting, it was just like, it was so amazing to see such a thing, And I believe if we look back to the time frame of that, was that on May 23rd, I believe, March 23rd. Yeah. So anyways, that's been happening quite a lot.
Is there some supercomputer that is churning all this stuff out? Or is there like a bunch of people in Switzerland in some underground thing that are constantly figuring out what's happening 30 years from now? Just like The Economist magazine telling us 33 years ago, because it is 33 years now, but they said that in 2018, watch out for this one world currency that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, well, so in 2018, we hit the all-time high for Bitcoin. So, I mean, even that right there is pretty interesting. That cover mentioned the year of 2018.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct.
And yeah, that was when the cryptocurrencies actually proved themselves as a whole. Because not only did Bitcoin hit all-time highs, all of the cryptos hit all-time highs that were around back then. as opposed to the cycle before that, there was pretty much no altcoins. So cryptocurrency as a whole hit that massive, high level on that year. But as for that economist cover and all that stuff, I mean, I think that stuff's interesting. My problem with it is too many people point at the ISO 20022 coins. And I really I'm not buying that stuff. I know that people are making their rounds on YouTube right now, like professing that that's the reason why these coins are going to do well. And a lot of the time they also say that Bitcoin's going to go to zero. So whenever I hear those two things in the same sentence, I immediately disregard it because it just sounds like a bunch of children talking. And as for this, more examples of Gematria and how it all works. Week numbers, day numerology, price targets. There's so many things that come into play, but let me just show you one really interesting thing. So I showed this because I'm showing this because I think it's a really interesting thing coming back to those 33s. So right here on this date, you can see by looking up right here, if you paused your screen, this day right here, the Bitcoin price hit $33,333 on the 2nd of January. So think about this. January is the first month and in the second day, and the year was the 21. So you have this 2121 and you hit the 33333 price. Now, this isn't by accident because the 21 number is really important for Bitcoin because there's 21 million Bitcoins to be mined. In circulation, the whole supply. But the other thing that's also really interesting is the all-time high date being on the 14th of April, the 144 number. That 144 number isn't by accident either, because ever since May of the last halving back in May of 2020, when the halving event happened, there's 144 blocks mined per day for Bitcoin. So that's been a huge reason why my all-time high prediction for Bitcoin will be on the new moon of December, and it'll be $144,000 Bitcoin.
The 4th of December.
Yes, because that is the new moon of let's go to the moon phases really quickly and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So you can see right here, new moon. And if you go to this column, you have December 4th. And then also another thing to pay attention to, this day is a Saturday. Okay. Yeah. Why is Saturday important? Because it is the Saturn day and Saturn comes back to the 21. Okay. So it's just really important that people look at the little, intricacies of all of this. So that 21 in the 21st year. And if you and again, it's in Chaldean 21 too. So this isn't by mistake whatsoever.
Maggie, I think Jordan's made the most precise and specific prediction ever on this channel.
I know. Oh my God. Those secret societies will be listening to this, Jordan, and they'll think, oh, quick, we better change the date. Jordan's onto us.
Well, I mean, I'm willing to be wrong about that, and I would like to be in a way, but the things that got me to that number actually aren't necessarily my opinions, and I could quickly actually show you why I feel this way. So the $144,000 number is not weird. Let me show you this chart just really quickly, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
So this is called the logarithmic growth curve chart. And if you actually study this chart, you can see that every all-time high actually hits the top of this channel. So you can see the bull market back in 2013. It hits the top of this channel in the beginning of December around the new moon. I could pull up the moon cycles, but you could trust me on this. It happened on the new moon of December 2013. Look at where it hits, the top of the logarithmic growth curve. Now we have this previous cycle. I'll zoom in a little more just so you can see what I'm talking about. Previous cycle hits December on the new moon, hits the top of the logarithmic growth curve chart. So now what we could just assume is every 4 years, December on a new moon, you're going to be hitting the top of the growth curve. And look at that, December 6th. If you pause, you can see where my cursor is on the right. It's at $145,000. So I'm not just pulling this number out of nowhere. It's very calculated. And it's based on data. It's based on data of previous bull runs. So not only am I being specific, I'm actually just giving you what is projected,
Okay. So that leads me on to one thing, and we might wrap it up at this point. But I guess you're on top of this whole cyber polygon conference that happened on the 9th of July, where Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of the
Yeah.
World Economic Forum, gave the most weird kind of presentation, because he really does come across as a bit of a Bond villain when he speaks. But he and another guy called Jurgens, and I can't remember what his position is, but it's almost like they are telling us that there's going to be some major cyber attack, and it will affect the supply chains around the world. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so very quickly, a lot of people that have talked about this have also compared it to Event 201. So Event 201, which happened in, I believe, October, November of 2019, you have this effect that didn't actually kick in for about 6 months, meaning that the World Health Organization and the market correction and all of that other stuff didn't actually happen until February into March. Now, I was telling people that don't take the dates of these things so seriously in the short term, because what they like to do typically is they like to measure it out by a certain amount of days. So if you were to assume 6 months from this event, and when was the day of the event, by the way? It was like the 9th of July.
Yeah, 9th of
Okay, so let's just quickly go out. What is 6 months roughly? Like 170 days?
Yeah, approximately.
So let's just have fun and say that around January that could be in the cards. And I actually have a lot of decodes coming for the month of February and March for 2022, because that's when I believe the market will actually, not crypto. I think crypto will start to crash right in the beginning of the year. But as for meaning Bitcoin will hit all-time highs in December, then altcoins will hit it slightly later into the beginning of January. And then by February, we should enter a short-term, bear market, but it's not a real bear market. It'll just be a big correction. And that's always what happens with crypto. But I do believe that into February or March, we're going to see our first big financial problem. And could that be related to cyber security and hacking? Absolutely, it could. And wouldn't that make sense considering it was 6 months after the event? Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And it's in a Shemitah year, so that works well.
Correct. And it's in a Shemitah year during a very specific numerological year. Like think about February 2nd, 2022 and February 22nd, 2022. That's a lot of twos.
Yeah.
Well, since the crash, the market correction happened for the markets as a whole. So February 24th was around the time when the traditional stock market indices started to correct, and it is written on Wikipedia as a market crash. And that would be the 2-year anniversary. So think about it. It's the 2-year anniversary in the 2 year in the 22 Hebrew year.
Wow. Interesting.
In the second month of the year. So
that's my birthday month.
February and March, I'm predicting that next year will be sort of like the dot-com bubble crash and the 9/11 event combined. So in the Shemitah of 2000 and 2001, in 2000 we had the dot-com bubble crash, which happened in March, by the way. So again, this adds to my feeling. And then in September, right before the Shemitah ended, we had 9/11. And so that's kind of like what I'm projecting out for this coming year. I think that the elites just have us on a time cycle. They have us on a time loop.
Right. So we've got loads to look forward to then. It's all good.
Well, you have a lot of, most millionaires, most billionaires are created through recessions because they're buying the dip. And they were prepared before it came.
Okay.
They
caused it.
If I'm telling everyone that, basically right now I'm just being like Michael Burry and I'm telling you like, get ready for something to happen. You can choose to pay attention or you don't need to. Like at the end of the day, that's completely up to everyone. And I'm also humble enough to say that I might be wrong. Right. It's just, there's never been a 7-year cycle that has been gone through unscathed. And especially if you just look up statistically what's happening right now with GDP and the amount of unemployment and the amount of small businesses that are permanently closed. I mean, this is the worst Shemitah to step into because we just had a year and a half of a massive financial disaster.
Yeah. Well, we should definitely touch base again in September and definitely December. If
I'm hanging on to that hope of lots of upside for the rest of this year. So thank you for that, at least, Jordan.
Well, again, it's not going to happen immediately. In the second week of October, historically, is when the bull run starts to create new highs. So don't expect to like jump out of your seats next month or the month after that. It's October into November that we should start to anticipate the market to actually recover. As of right now, it'll just be chopping around in this range generally.
Yeah.
And anytime the prices are low, it's a good time to buy, not financial advice. And every time the prices are up, it's just chill out, just relax, because there's going to be dips.
Do you still, there is this consensus out there that we think it's, and it could be this psychological sentiment that self-fulfilling prophecy, that it could go down to 20 or even below. I mean, what's your feeling at the moment about that?
I've told people that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 27,000, but just a quick note on this. Yesterday, the Bitcoin price on the index chart, which is actually all the Bitcoin price action across all the exchanges. I'll just show you really quickly. Yesterday, the low that we got, you could see right here where I'm circling my cursor. When I hover it over yesterday, we got 29. So what's the week of the year that we're in right now? The 29th week of the year. Now, is that weird?
Yeah.
Or is that just the code working itself through every time? So if I don't think that the 27,000 is happening. That was the chance on July 22nd. We couldn't push that low. And I would say that now we're ready for some relief. Because if you look at how a bull run ends, and by the way, if Bitcoin goes to 20,000, the bull run's over.
Yeah.
It's over. So these people that are coming out being like Bitcoin's a zero and they think their favorite altcoin is going to do well, they're delusional. Like if Bitcoin goes below to those sub 25K levels, it's indicative of a bear market.
Yeah.
And the reason is because the amount of time that you trade at a distributional top, and I'll give an example, right? If you take from around the highs of 42,000 on January 9th and you measure to about the breakdown, you're getting around 130 days or so. Let's go from the breakdown out 130 days. That gives us till the end of September, and that aligns with my thesis on October recovery. Pretty much the amount of time that you're trading at top is the amount of time you trade at bottom. And any theories below 30K Bitcoin are in the cards, but every time it makes it down to that level, you see what happens. Like 2 days ago, if I told you that Bitcoin would have a bounce of, 12 or 13% from the wick bottom in 2 days, you would be looking at me like I had 10 heads, because you probably watched 20 YouTube channels that told you we're going to 20, And I just don't fall for it. I never fall for the FUD.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Clear. Well, from my perspective, I really appreciate you coming on today, and it's been great, and it's a real eye-opener, and I hope the viewers appreciate these new insights and a new way to look at trading, etc., or just life in general and how life really works. So I'm going to hand it back to Sean, because I've hijacked the whole interview. Sean, sorry about that.
No, Maggie, that was the whole point. It's been fantastic having you bring Jordan along and hijacking it. You've been a great co-host, I guess I've been the co-host. But look, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. It's fascinating. A huge amount of food for thought and many things to learn. So, look, any of my audience that wants to learn more about what's been covered today, there's a link below to Jordan's channel. You can jump over there, Waters Above Crypto, and check it out. You broadcast how many days a week is it?
Well, I typically make about 3 videos a week, and then over on my Patreon, I do something called a Red Pill episode, where every single week I do a technical analysis podcast, and I actually go over a bunch of altcoins. So in my daily videos on YouTube, I tend to cover the most important, the dollar index and Bitcoin and XRP. And then during the weekend, I do my, my broader episode talking about the altcoins. So yeah, you could visit my channel, and then all the links are in the description if you wanted to join on the Patreon. And then also I have my mastermind course where you could get in contact with me via email. And my course is where I teach all my strategies of technical analysis and combining it with gematria, numerology, and astrology.
How many other people sort of in the trading space utilize such a wide array of tools? Well, specifically, how many people are you aware of that sort of use gematria along with other strategies like Wyckoff, etc.?
Well, so I was actually kind of lucky where I ran into this one channel very early on, actually before I was taking charting seriously, and it was this guy named Arcane Bear, and I haven't watched his. I haven't watched his videos in quite a while. Sorry?
I've met him before. I've spoke to him a few times. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, you should tell Tio to get in contact with me because I would love to chat with him. He was a huge inspiration on the Wyckoff thing. And I just really liked his approach of being as little of emotion as possible, but also being kind of just a clear and concise speaker. Like he's very clear in his message, and he was good at and although we might have different worldviews, we might have different like ideas, I wouldn't know that unless I spoke with him. But anyways, he was a huge influence on me. So he is, in my opinion, the greatest source for Wyckoff from a perspective of somebody who only focuses on Wyckoff. But as for people who are using moon cycles and all that stuff, I'm not actually quite sure. I have had some of my people contact me saying that my stuff has been spread all over Twitter and other Telegram groups. And it seems like I've even actually kind of gotten some people to start using the moon cycle indicator. So I don't know if I'm like pioneering that, but the gematria thing is definitely something that I don't see anyone doing. I've tried searching the internet for gematria and crypto, and I'm pretty much the only thing that shows up. So yep, I guess we're doing something unique over here.
There you go. Fantastic. And I'm really happy to have brought something unique to my audience. And thank you very much once again for facilitating that, Maggie. And most importantly, Jordan, thanks so much for your time. Would love to have you back again in the future for sure.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching. As I said, links below if you want to check out what is above crypto, learn more about Jordan over there. And hopefully we'll have Maggie back on the channel again in the very near future as well. Cheers to you all. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.